You don't lose control in arguments because you are weak. You lose control because your system is running too hot. Most people think staying calm is a personality trait, something you either have or you don't. But if that were true, you wouldn't. Feel so clear before the conversation starts. You know what you want to say. You know your point makes sense. You even tell yourself, stay calm this time. And then it happens again in the middle of the conversation. Something shifts, your chest tightens, your throat closes, your thoughts start racing faster than you can organize them. And before you can adjust, your body takes over, your voice cracks, your eyes fill. And suddenly, you're no longer seen as someone making a point. You are seen as someone losing control. That moment is where most people draw the wrong conclusion. They think the problem is emotional weakness, so they try to fix it with more discipline, more suppression, more self-control. But that approach keeps failing because the issue was never about control in the first place. It was about capacity. You were trying to operate at a level your system was not prepared to sustain, and instead of redesigning the system, you kept blaming the output. So the real question is not how to stop this from happening. The real question is why your system reacts this way under pressure and what it is actually trying to do for you in that moment. Let's slow this down and look at what is actually happening beneath the surface. You enter a conversation with a clear intention. You want to explain something or defend something or fix something that feels off at the beginning. Everything is still manageable. Your thoughts are structured. Your tone is controlled. You feel like you are operating normally. But then the conversation starts to shift. The other person interrupts or misunderstands or pushes back in a way you didn't expect, and without realizing it, your internal system starts stacking pressure. You are no longer just talking. You are processing multiple layers at the same time. You are trying to listen carefully while preparing your next response, while monitoring their tone, while controlling your own emotions, while trying not to say the wrong thing. That is a heavy cognitive load, and it builds fast. Most people don't notice this buildup because it feels normal, but your system does. Your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes shorter, your muscles tighten slightly, your attention narrows. This is not weakness. This is activation. Your nervous system is preparing you for intensity. Problem is not that this happens. The problem is that it keeps escalating without release. Because instead of reducing the load, you keep pushing through it. You try to stay sharp, stay composed, stay in control. But the system has limits, and when too many processes run at once, something has to shut down usually. It is your ability to regulate emotion. And when that drops, the reaction takes over, not because you chose it, but because the system reached capacity. This is why telling yourself to just stay calm never works, because you are trying to fix a system's problem with a willpower solution, and willpower is the first thing that disappears under overload. So the real issue is not that you are too emotional. It is that your environment and internal process are not designed to handle that level of intensity. And until you change that structure, the pattern will repeat itself. No matter how hard you try to control it, the shift begins when you stop asking how to control the reaction and start asking what the reaction is doing for you, because your system is not malfunctioning. It is responding. Think of it like this. When an engine runs beyond its limit, it does not ask for permission to cool down. It just does not, because it is weak, but because it is protecting itself from damage. Your body works the same way under emotional pressure. When the intensity crosses a certain threshold, your system activates a counter response, not to embarrass you, not to sabotage you, but to regulate you. Tears are part of that response. They slow your breathing. They interrupt the escalation, shift your state from pure intensity into partial recovery. In other words, they are a built-in cooling mechanism, and once you see it that way, something changes. You stop labeling the moment as failure and start recognizing it as a signal that your system is overloaded, a signal that too many processes are running at once, a signal that something needs to be adjusted, not suppressed. There is another layer most people miss. Your body is not only trying to regulate you, it is also trying to reduce the threat level of the situation. When intensity rises too high, your system assumes risk, not logical risk, biological risks. Oh? It shifts your state in a way that lowers aggression both internally and externally. This is why those reactions often change the tone of the conversation, even if it is not the way you want. Instead of seeing it as losing control, you can start seeing it as your system stepping in early, imperfect, but intentional. And this is the turning point, because once you understand that the reaction has a function, you stop fighting it blindly and start building around it, not to eliminate it completely, but to stay in control even when it shows up. So instead of trying to remove the reaction, you build a small system that works with it, not complicated, not perfect, just something you can actually use in the moment. 3 steps first. Catch the signal early, not when everything collapses, but when it just begins. That slight pressure in your chest, that shift in breathing, that moment when your thoughts start speeding up. Most people ignore this stage. They wait until the reaction is obvious, but by then, the system is already overloaded. So your goal is simple: interrupt the buildup before it peaks. Do something physical and immediate. Lift your gaze slightly. Look at a fixed point above eye level. This small movement does 2 things. It redirects your attention outward, and it prevents your system from fully collapsing inward. It is not about stopping emotion. It is about delaying the spike. Second, rebalance your mental load. Right now, your system is overloaded because everything is happening at once. So you give it structure. Force a small, controlled cognitive task, not something trivial, something just difficult enough to require focus. Count backwards in uneven steps. Reconstruct a sequence. Hold a pattern in your mind. What this does is simple. It shifts resources back into structured thinking, and when structured thinking increases, emotional intensity decreases, not because you suppressed it, but because you redistributed your capacity. Third, create a controlled pause, not an escape, not walking away emotionally, just a short reset. You step out for a moment, get a glass of water, slow 1 breath, release tension from your hands or shoulders. Then you come back. Same conversation, but now you are operating below your limit. This is important. You are not trying to win the moment. You are trying to stay functional inside it, and you only need one of these to work, not all 3. Pick the one that feels easiest and make it reliable, because in high-intensity moments, you don't rise to your expectations. You fall back to your system. So keep the system simple enough that you can actually use it. If you apply this consistently, something subtle starts to change, not overnight, not dramatically, but in a way that compounds over time. You will still feel the same intensity. You will still care deeply. That part of you does not disappear, but the way you move through those moments becomes different. You stop getting overwhelmed as quickly. Notice the signals earlier. You recover faster. And most importantly, you stay present instead of shutting down. Instead of losing your ability to speak clearly, you remain in the conversation just long enough to express what actually matters. That alone changes your confidence. Not the kind that comes from always being calm, but the kind that comes from knowing you can handle yourself when things are not calm. You begin to trust your system, not because it is perfect, but because it is predictable, and that predictability reduces fear. You no longer enter difficult conversations expecting failure. You enter them with a structure, something to fall back on, something that holds you when intensity rises over time. This reduces the second layer. Most people struggle with self-judgment. You stop replaying conversations in your head. You stop criticizing your reaction because you understand what happened. You know what to adjust next time. This is where real progress happens, not in eliminating emotion, but in building a system that can carry it. The result is not becoming colder or detached. It is becoming more stable, more clear, more deliberate, and that stability compounds. Small improvements repeated over many interactions quietly reshape how you show up, not by force, but by design, because in the long run, consistency will always outperform intensity, and a system you can rely on will always outperform motivation you cannot sustain. You are not someone who falls apart under pressure. You are someone whose system reacts early when the load gets too high, and with the right structure. That is not a weakness. It is awareness. Most people don't feel the shift until it is too late. You feel it sooner, stronger, clearer. The problem was never the reaction. Problem was not having a system to hold it. Because intensity without structure feels like losing control, but intensity with structure becomes something else, becomes precision, it becomes honesty, becomes the ability to stay in the room and still say what matters, so you don't need to become a different person. You don't need to remove what you feel. You need a system that can carry what you feel, something simple, something reliable, something you can return to when things get difficult. And over time, that system becomes part of you, not something you remember, but something you use without thinking. So the next time it happens, don't fight your reaction, adjust your structure. If you have ever been stuck in this loop, comment SYST, and if you want to build one small system at a time, subscribe. We are not trying to control everything. We are building something that works even when things are not under control.